So hi everybody. I'm gonna quickly introduce myself so it's less awkward for everybody. My name is Ariam and I study clinical psychology. And I've always been interested in Black mental health and everything in the spectrum. And this conversation, hopefully, we will be able to discuss some of the topics that we have at hand, some questions that dig a little bit deeper in the Black mental health, discussion and what it looks like for us personally, for both of you, a little bit about yourselves, and in conjunction to your Blackness and mental health as well. So we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of an introduction. So I would love to know a bit more about what you guys do, who you are, and your relationship to mental health, and whether it being in professional setting or personal. So yeah. Aisha, would you like to go ahead and start us off, or?
Sure, thank you. It's an honor and privilege to be here. I'd like to begin with recognizing the territory in which I work, live, and play, the Indigenous ground. So I'll start with that. My name is Ayesha Sackey. You've got my name already. I'm originally from Ghana, West Africa. I lived in London, UK for many years, and more recently in Canada for almost 12 years. In terms of background with mental health, I'm also a manager of clinical services manager for Provincial Health Services Authority in terms of mental health and addiction. I also own my own private practice in working with grief, loss, mental health, and various. I've also, for my UBC adjunct professor, by teaching mental health, advanced mental health. And mental health is close to my heart because I believe that when it comes to, it doesn't matter who we are, our background, our culture, mental health knows boundary. It doesn't matter who you are. So that is something that is close to my heart. And I would like to start from there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Aisha. We appreciate that. How about you, Parker?
Sure, thanks. So my name is Parker Johnson. My pronouns are he, him. I'm speaking to you from the traditional territories of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, specifically the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations. For those of you who don't know, so Vancouver Island, Victoria area. And I think it's important for us to recognize when we're using technology in this way, I see it as a form of resistance and joy. I think that technology has been used to historically oppress Black and Brown people. So when we can come together and talk about mental health in this way, I hope that it benefits folks, and I know that it'll benefit me, so thank you. My background, I studied psychology and minored in education in university, and I still have ambition to pursue a master's in counseling as well, so I'm probably going to pick your brain at some point, Ayesha. But my work focused around at-risk youth. I was youth support worker for about 5.5 years, and I also did community inclusion with at-risk youth, primarily Indigenous youth, youth of color. And I run a community platform called This Is Table Talk. And it was originally a men's circle that quickly expanded into a community discussion platform using an Indigenous methodology called the kitchen table. And I would invite community members, diverse community members, to attend these sessions in person. This was pre-COVID. And they just continued to grow and grow and grow. And it was really affirming to me that, once we hit like 75 people attending, these were free events, and I'd pay out of pocket for food because you don't want to invite people into your home and not feed them. It was affirming to me that we need these spaces. We need to share our stories with each other and just feel validated in our experience. If you live on the West Coast, it is a isolating experience at times. And so when we have these opportunities to talk about our mental health and well-being and the experiences that we're going through, I think it does something to our self-esteem. It does something for our confidence and really reminds us where our community is. So I'll just stop there, but it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks for having
No,
me.
please keep going if you find the certain questions more interesting than one, please go ahead. We'd like to expand. That's why we have you both here, because we value and honor your words and your experiences in your work, or else we wouldn't be here. So feel free to continue as much as you would like. So you've mentioned a lot of, stuff that I've also done, where, community engagement, working with youth, at-risk youth. And you've also mentioned that there isn't, that many Black people in particularly in Vancouver, Lower Mainland. How was that experience for you, navigating in another people of color group versus within your community? So this can be specifically for Parker, but also for you, Miss Ayesha. How was it like navigating, mental health and the profession that you do as a Black person, and you're integrating yourself in different communities? So how was that like for you?
I think it's a humbling experience when you're allowed into somebody else's cultural practices, and just to see how people gather, to see how people heal each other. Indigenous communities, there's such rich knowledge there. South Asian communities, the way that they prioritize family unit and legacy and storytelling, that I feel, at least that I see in my own Black communities, because we're not homogenous. There's heterogeneous communities.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like being in a silo almost, and that's the first thing that I noticed when I was running these table talk sessions. Was there were people of color, there were Black folks coming out of the woodwork that I'd never seen before. I was like, where are you? But I know that there are communities, Indigenous communities, Latinx communities, that are quite tight and close knit. And so that was the biggest kind of surprise for me. And it was nice to see that kind of integration, those people meet and share, because you walk away with new lessons and kind of the motivation to want to connect. And a good reminder, I think, as Black people, we hold so much pain and grief in our bodies, but we have so much to celebrate. And it's almost like being under pressure all of the time. And so when we can hit the pause button and remind ourselves, or even learn how to connect to our cultural practices, and find those aunties and uncles and those mentors to remind us who we are, for me, that was the big piece around, oh my goodness, there's so much for us to learn here.
Right. Well, thank you so much for that. How about you, Ms. Ayesha?
So the question is relating to my cultural.
So a little bit about your cultural, background, and the fact that we're all Black here. How was that experience for you as a Black woman coming into other spaces when you're working in mental health sections? So obviously, as people that are involved in mental health in different spectrums, we are encountering different types of people from all walks of life, also different races, different communities, cultural backgrounds. How was that like for you as a Black woman navigating in these spaces?
So that's a great question. For me, as a Black woman, first of all, recognizing my own Blackness, I was very aware. I didn't mention before, my background is social work. Even before going to social work, I was in accounting before, and that is, my dad was in accounting, and being raised with my dad being an accounting firm, it's like, okay, I want to be just like daddy, right? So with that, so I went into accounting only to started volunteering, and I went to a nursing home. This is all back in London, UK. I went to a nursing home to go and volunteer. And then I realized, oh my goodness, this old age, I've never experienced it in my life for the first time. I'm in a place seeing all old people who are aging, and whereas in my culture back home, the old people are with the family. So I'm like, oh my word. And then the biggest learning was, I heard, oh, there's a social worker coming. Oh, we have to tidy everyone, clean the room. I'm like, who is this person coming? And when she came, before she left, I'm like, can I talk to you? What do you do? And she told me about social work program. Like, I want to do what this lady does. So then I went back to school, go and study social work in London, UK, Goldsmiths University. I got my bachelor's there. And then when I came to Canada, then I did my master's in the House University. So just giving my background, like is a whole new forum of seeing how people are treated. Whereas from my culture, there is no such thing as a nursing home. I've never experienced a nursing home in Ghana. So it was a culture shock to me. However, I still came to realize that there's still people want to care for their family members. People still came to visit, you know, and go. So I felt their pain. So that was the first part. The second part, I'm coming to UK, I am coming to Canada as a Black woman. I thought, okay, I'm qualified, I'm experienced, you know, it's going to be easy peasy. I realized, oh my word, now I can't get the job, and the doors were closing on me. And it was, so I went through my own challenges. And like I said, I speak, you see my hand is going everywhere. But I realized the culture is also different with the other races. When I say other races, I just like the Caucasian race, like very proper, like hands is not moving anywhere. I'm like,
Yeah.
it was a huge shock to me. However, we persevered, you know, embracing difference. And I find that I talk a lot. I find that I share my story. I love storytelling. We can go out for a lunch at work and then we tell them, oh my goodness, this is what happened. So storytelling was a huge one for me. And I haven't shared with you too, I have two boys, a 23-year-old and a 19-year-old, two Black boys. And I have to say, no, mixed, two Black boys. So I know when they walk out of the door, they haven't come back. I'm constantly checking. I'm constantly testing. Are you okay? I'm constantly reminding them how to carry themselves because I know how they're being perceived in society. And as a Black woman, I know, one, I'm a woman, two, I'm Black, three, so almost the triple jeopardy is all against us. However, on a personal note, in spite of all of that, I'm confident that we all have what is called resilience. We all have something is always informing us. The storytelling, the way I was raised has made me who I am today. So when I meet people, other races, I teach and share my story. And I also share with the young people that I work with that yes, society is against us, but we still have a lot that we can share if people are open. So I just leave it at that for now because there's so much I'll be telling you as we go along. So
Perfect.
Parker.
Perfect. You know, it's always, I always say, like, you know, through media, through everything that we talk about, you know, Blackness is always seen as this dooming thing, where, you know, our culture is not seeing, the very different aspects of our lives are not seeing. And even when we're talking about mental health, you know, within the Black community, it's already a dooming topic in our heads. And sometimes I try to pull away from that conversation and I look at the lighthearted stuff when we're coming into this conversation. For example, the shocks I had when I first moved here, when I started working in different homes, you know, certain things that I would want to do out of care are not necessarily accepted within within the mental health spectrum. And how can I change that to fit in more with the Western way of caring for people and what that psychology means. So I always try to go into it with, you know, a bit of a lightheartedness because it can be very, very hard to talk about some of the things, you know, when regarding to mental health within the Black community. So before we get into the heavy stuff, that's why we wanted to go in with a bit of, you know, personal experiences. And like you've mentioned, Ayesha, some storytelling because it helps people relate to our experiences and open up other people more as well. So I really appreciate that. So the next question is, how do cultural influences impact parents' ability to care for mental health of the first generation within the Black youth? So obviously there is first generation in I'm not necessarily even first generation. I migrated here, so I would consider myself an immigrant, but my relationship with mental health is very different versus my parents who are also immigrants. So I would say with the current generation versus the older generation, and especially when looking at it from like a Western viewpoint, how has the culture of like back in the day, historical context, you know, colonialism, slavery, all of these things impacted Black people? And so how has that in itself impacted the way our parents parent us and the relationship that we have with mental health? How would you define that? That was a very long-winded of saying, what is the relationship between Black parents and Black children?
I'll start. If it's okay. Okay. So you can see already when I say to Parker, if it's okay, it starts from that. From a Black culture, we're told respect. Respect is a huge thing for us, you know, ask permission, be respectful. So for me, that was really knocked into me personally, my journey. So when it comes to Black parents, how's our ability as parents, how's that impacting the children that we have? Again, like I said, my son was born in UK, both of them born in UK. So they've never even been to Ghana. So what are you talking about, mom?
Mm-hmm.
But first things first, one, our experience, our culture of don't talk, don't tell anyone, don't wash your dirty linen in public, the secrecy. So since I've heard that a lot, I'll be reluctant to tell somebody, hey, this is how I'm feeling, this is what is going on, because it's been ingrained in me not to talk. Does that make sense? So with that in mind, the only time I personally made the change is through the education. When I learned about social work and I learned about self-awareness, mental health. I'm like, oh, wow, we should talk, we should say. I'm like, oh my goodness, how am I like, but say, don't say, don't say. So our own upbringing as parents and the way the culture will form, we also unconsciously also can instill those in our children, right? So with that in mind, something that we as parents need to be mindful of and know that we're in a different society now. The first, they have the television, they have the phone, they have their friends, their Facebook, Instagram. My son keeps correcting me how to say it. So we need to be how to be.
You got it.
And also the second one is to be mindful of shame. Like, don't tell anyone, and then just snap out of it. You know, you can just stop, just snap out of it. You're feeling down, it will just stop. And to keep that in mind, no, it will not. Mental illness is the mental illness. So learning as new parents to be mindful that we live in a different culture now. Talk to the children, let them, hey, what's going on? We also have to, as parents, I'm talking from parental angle now, to be humble to ask our children, what's going on for you? Hear their view. And just because they don't talk today does not mean they will not talk tomorrow. Just say, you know, and provide that reassurance and be open to learning. But the fact, to answer your question, the way we were raised as parents, the culture in we were before we moved over to Canada or immigrated has informed our parenting. And this does impact the children, because the children are in the Canadian society, they're seeing the freedom of their friends doing or whatever. How's it the mom and dad say, you can't do this, you can't do that, you have to be home by 6 o'clock, I have to take your phone away from you. But why? My friends have freedom, they're driving, they're doing all of these things. So our upbringing does impact our young ones in the first generation. So that's something that as a counselor, I work with parenting, how to have that conversation with their children. So I'll leave some for Parker.
There's anything left. Parker, go ahead.
I'm learning. I'm soaking it up. I should say, one, I don't have kids, so I'm speaking as somebody who does not have kids. I'm also speaking from the perspective of an adoptee. I'm originally from Savannah, Georgia, and I was adopted to Vancouver Island. My adoptive parents are from Up Island. I also mentor and support fellow adopted youth of African descent. And I think in times of crises, you know, like mental health, there's always a chance of re-traumatization. And I noticed that even though myself and even the mentees that I support or work with, I noticed that even though they've been raised outside of their Black culture, there are forces that still unconsciously kind of affect us. You know, I still had a father, I still had a mother, I still experienced lessons around toxic masculinity. Don't express yourself, don't cry, don't snitch. I love that Ayesha brought that up. Don't snitch. There's all of these messages to repress. Don't communicate. Don't express yourself. It's not safe to. These are the messages that we kind of learn. And you throw Blackness into the mix when the world will treat you a certain way, and your radar is constantly going. You don't know which way is safe. You know, Aisha's saying she's texting her sons, where you at? How you doing? checking in, come home at this time. There's a reason for that, right? And I think that does something to us. And so I just wanted to mention the perspective of adoption, because that complexity, all of a sudden you are, I don't know how to describe it other than kind of a divide or a barrier between cultures rather. And so when we're talking about mental health, it's almost like speaking different languages. And maybe Ayesha could speaking to parents who've also adopted kids. I'm not sure, but I know that it's a complex place, and kind of leads into a larger conversation around, I think, colonization in general. But we'll leave that later. But I think that that question is really, really good.
Right.
Because I also think, just to finish off, I also think, about my father who worked so hard. He came from a really dire situation, so many siblings, poor, worked his way up, support a family, have enough money to adopt a child. That's a whole nother thing. But those experiences and those traumatic experiences informs the way that he interacts with the world, and informs the way that he has taught me to view the world in so many different ways, right? I've had to, we kind of deviate from our parents' teachings, but their survival mechanisms, they definitely impact us, So I guess I'll just leave it at that for now.
Yeah, well, thank you both. I guess pulling from that question as well, one of the common themes is, the very much so, intersectional identities that we all carry, whether those identities put us at a higher level within our Blackness or, lower a little bit. We can talk about such things as colorism within Black community. We can talk about, the adoption. We can talk about, being a Black parent and how that looks like. There's so many layers within our Blackness, but the very first thing being our Blackness being visible, and which dictates all of these areas in our experiences, being a Black adoptee, being a Black parent, being a Black this and that, which, influences our experiences. So my question is, with those intersectional, identities that we all carry, each one of us carry, how do you think, or do you think that there are enough professionals that understand this complexity of Black people with the identities that we carry, whether it being a white therapist, a non-Black psychotherapist, whatever it may be in those professions and within mental health? Do you think that they have the understanding of Black complexity and all the identities that we carry within our Blackness? It's a very heavy question, but you can take your time as well. Would you like to go ahead, Ayesha or Parker?
Sure.
I usually do popcorn style for my children so they don't even have a choice, but I'm going to give you guys a choice because Black History Month just ended. So you have the 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Ayesha, did you want to start us off?
Sure. Okay. So I'll start. It is a very complex question in itself. Asking about, like, I'm speaking for another professional, so that I want to put straight to the table. I cannot speak for all professionals. I'm confident that there are professionals out there who are doing their best, going for all the training, who have allyship, who are open to learning from other professionals. We provide a lot of supervision, like group supervision, where we can discuss a lot of things. So in respect for the profession and a multidisciplinary team that we all come from, and various colleges, including the counseling colleges, they're ensuring that people are trained. So I'm confident there are professionals out there. So that's one. Second, I think it's up to us or the individual to make sure you are searching for the right professional and asking the right questions. And those are some of the tips that we can provide on what to ask, how to ask the question. And my hope is, if there are Caucasians, other disciplines, or other races who have not so failed with various cultures, I'm hoping that this video, this education, this forum will also give them the confidence to ask, I don't know, help me to understand that. Tell me, being humble to ask the client, the patient, whoever is in front of you, who's asked in front of you, tell me more. Help me to understand your experience. It takes courage. It takes a lot of humility to start with. So that's one. And then the other part is that Unfortunately, the other reason why it's hard for people to come and the complexities is also the media. Many of you will recall the movie The Beautiful Mind. That is the white guy who, you know, he's had mental illness, but how it was glorified, it was so personified in a good way. However, when it comes to the media, the Black woman or the Black girl, the Black youth with mental illness, it's not positive, it's negative. So with that in mind, we won't come forward to go and seek the help. So the media is also playing part of this. So that means that it delays before people seek out and go for the help that is needed. So my hope is that there are professionals out there, and we're hoping that this, the incident of George Floyd, the conversation is happening, they should reach out and get the training that is needed. And never forget that the client, the patient, whoever is sitting in front of you is the expert in their situation. They are the expert in their living experience, what they've gone through, the trauma, their father, their parents, the intergeneration is coming. So ask the question and say, you don't know. And if you don't know, make a referral for them to see somebody else.
Right. So I guess a little bit to follow up though, just because you've mentioned trainings and you know, all the right things, especially with what was going on around May and June, where with the Black Lives Matter movement, there were a lot of, you know, on-spot trainings, on-spot, so many things sparking up. But do you think it's, do you think that these biases still exist within these professionals? You know, you can be you know, within my field as well, you know, I can see very, you know, professional people working, doing really great at what they do, but there's certain biases as human beings that we have. Do you think that has a huge effect on Black clients or, you know, Black patients?
Absolutely. That I say with confidence. And anyone can email me if they want me to question me.
We will let them know. I'm there with you.
And I say that I'm going to back it up, because when we talk about Blackness, anti-racism is also the conscious and the unconscious. So whether you are aware of it or not, it is informing your practice. And I've always used this, I read this in the Harvard Business Magazine about this analogy. I'm sure we have time. Shall I go for it?
Yeah.
Okay, there's this analogy about we're all in the river, the salmon, the fish is in the river swimming. The current is all going in one direction. So whether you're in the river and you're just swimming, you're still being part of it. The question is, what activities, what active steps are you taking to go against the current, to go the other way? It will take courage. It will take exertion of force, because if you're just there, just doing your bare minimum, oh, I have my practice, I'm a doctor, I'm a psychologist, I can talk, I'm married to a Black guy, I'm white, my best friend is a Black woman, and this, so I'm good, I am not. It doesn't work that way. We have to be really conscious and be an ally. Ask the questions. And the key thing I want to tell people is, it doesn't matter what profession you are, educate your heart. Educate your heart. Why? Because the heart is the seat of motivation. And the other part is from various disciplines, psychology you mentioned, social work you mentioned, and I can start going. Don't forget the theoretical, the evidence that were taught was based on what? Caucasian, a lot of that. Very minimal research has been made on Black people, you know? So when we are saying, I have this evidence-based practice, I have to be mindful that I'm not applying the blanket one that just because, for example, CBT applies for depression will not work for me. It might work for the white person, but it may not work for the Black person. So we need to be mindful of the interventions that were put in place in terms of therapy and the work that we do. Yes, we have their evidence-based, a lot of evidence-based around that, but we have to be mindful. And that's why I also respect so much the Indigenous community, the self-work care, the storytelling, you know, and the modalities that they're using to make sure all aspects is covered. not just in the eldest and the yeah. So yeah.
No, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought it up, because one of the things that we also talk about, especially when I'm referencing my culture, is the power of prayer, and how that is very much so shamed within the Black community, whereas it is our way of meditating and our way of keeping up with all the things that were happening, a way of coping. So when we are reversing all the coping mechanism that Black people have used for centuries, and not just within the Western world, but also not just the diaspora, but also, in Africa, and how there's so many cultural practices to help us deal with emotional health. And that has never been researched in terms of how we can integrate that within, the recent studies, because a lot of, quite honestly, a lot of psychology is based in lots of racist research. So we can all acknowledge that and still understand that there's so many biases, towards the African diaspora or Black people in general. So I'm really, really glad that you brought it up as well. We're gonna go back to that question to Parker as well, if
Yeah,
you
sure.
still remember that question.
I do. Yeah. I've got them up here, and these are really good questions. And I echo what Ayesha was saying, that I think there are people or professionals, non-Black professionals, who are putting in the effort. They're recognizing that their scope of practice has been extremely narrow. I think there are many Black professionals that also exist. It's unfortunate that the mainstream doesn't really represent, like, we don't get fed that. We don't know. We don't have access. In this way, we don't have access to them. And I think that's shifting. But I find it fascinating that all roads have led back to equity. Like, the most privileged white professionals and business owners are now having conversations around equity in a really loud way because of the power of technology. And I think being quarantined and locked down and having to look at your smartphone and seeing injustices back to back to back, all of a sudden you're injected into a lived experience that you were able to opt out of. And so all roads have led back to this conversation around equity. And in that way, I'm seeing more white professionals, practitioners, really trying to opt in, I guess is what I'll say. And that's not to say that they weren't aware of what was going on. I think privilege is really insidious. I think white supremacy culture is really insidious. I think in a way it keeps us blind. It keeps everybody blind. But they couldn't unsee that. And none of us can unsee that. And they're now in a conversation that isn't new, but they're trying to figure out the words to participate. And I love that analogy of what it takes to go upstream. Join us going upstream. And I think what I hope people will recognize as they take on that journey and do that inner heart work, as Ayesha said, is like, you're not alone in it. Like, you can actually ask for guidance, whether it's from your colleagues or from people in the community. We don't be tokenistic in it, but we can be authentic in asking for guidance. We're actually not alone in this journey. So just to answer the question, I do think that there are informed professionals. I don't know if all of them understand the complexity that is Black mental health, because, I mean, I'm only one Black person. I don't understand the full complexity of Black mental health. So it's a larger conversation. And I also love the fact that we don't have research representing these things. And I hope to see that change. I know it is changing. So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. One of the things that you mentioned, Parker, where there isn't that much research, but in hopes that in the future that there will be more research, and especially with changing times, there's a lot of things that within our mental health, because society changes, and when society changes, our brain makeup changes to adjust, and how that looks like versus back in the day, and the impact of so many historical contexts into that have somehow made it into our DNA, and the way that we act towards each other, the understanding of Blackness across the globe, and so many things this is all part of our DNA, and seeing how that changes, and the research, in the near future, hopefully that will be exciting to see. My next question is, I know you guys have the questions up, but I'm gonna throw in a little bit of a curveball, if that's okay. because these conversations are really interesting and I like to pull more from what you guys are saying. So one of the things that constantly come up within, a lot of young Black children is how to have conversations about mental health with their parents, and how to, whether it being talking about their own mental health, whether it being things that are affecting their parents or society. Since sometimes I could say for my culture, there's a lot of words that don't necessarily translate from English when it comes to like mental health directly into my language. So there's the language barrier in how I communicate it with my parents. And then on top of that, there's a cultural, I would say, misunderstanding, because it's not crossed yet. So how can we have these conversations understanding the context of Blackness and the many identities, and how to have these conversations? Obviously, again, a very loaded question, but in your experience and kind of with your professions as well, how do you see these conversations happening, especially in today's generation?
I believe that even this forum, the work that Black Connections are doing is a start. And there's a huge, I've seen in the media a lot since Black History Month, since Black Lives Matter, there's a conversation. People are beginning to talk. People are beginning to recognize, like, oh my goodness. So I think that's a good place to start. And for families, friends, and also just normalizing the conversation. Hey, yesterday I woke up, I'm not feeling too good. I'm tossing and turning. I'm feeling quite irritable. I don't even know why. I'm not sleeping well. And then we start like this. Maybe it's the COVID, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, but it was there already. So I think beginning with the conversations, people in positions like us, being able to be vulnerable. Let's be vulnerable and talk about it. If they're in schools, the teacher, when you're teaching the students, even online or not, tell your students, you're not in a good place today. You were tossing and turning. Let them know, I'm not feeling good today, so bear with me. So this is part of the conversation that in my experience will be good too. And I'm also aware of the language. Again, like my culture, it's a taboo. You can't even talk about mental. Are you kidding me? To say something, so you know, well, don't even point your head. Don't even go there. So I laugh and I giggle. That's another way we deal with that too. You start giggling. That's our coping mechanism, to start laughing, because I'm like, if I don't laugh, I'm gonna cry, right? Because all emotions. So I would say on a individual, personal level, on an individual level, societies, there's a change happen. I feel the shift. Let's continue the talk. Black Connections are doing it. Let's set example by being vulnerable to say, I'm not in a good place. I'm on medication. I'm taking these tablets. The doctors are helping me, and I'll keep going back to review it. And therapists and counseling, we can say, yes, please make sure you see the doctor. Let them do the thorough assessment. Psychologists do the thorough assessment, and then and make a recommendation. And it's not a taboo. And because there's a recovery, there's a way it gets better. It gets better, and we can all recover. I would say recovery in itself, I can also define it when it comes to mental health. Recovery is not a destination, it's a process, you know? And that in itself is a hope that we can be mindful. So yes, let's set a good example. Let's role model having the conversation, and be vulnerable to say we're not in a good place. And it will be a shift. I know some cultures will be hard, like, oh no, even when as I'm talking about it, I'm already cringing, like, you know, so yeah.
I guess one of the things that you've also mentioned where, I could say I relate a lot of these conversations to my personal experiences, because I wouldn't be here if I didn't feel moved by, mental health and what that meant for me. So one of the things that you brought up in terms of talking about certain things, and you mentioned earlier where, our culture, I would say within the Black culture, we're very private. We hide our pain, and internalizes in so many ways. And coming into this profession, talking about, be more open. I'm like, am I doing that as well? So these are really important topics to bring up, to even audit ourselves and see where we are as Black people, as people that work in within the mental health. So that is a very good point. I'm going to go. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. I want to add too.
Yeah, please.
I was so shocked in my practice when I did my social work bachelor's in UK during the course that, a lot of things is going to be coming up with you for you. Make sure you seek counseling. I recall putting my hand up to go, what did you just say? And that is not a bad thing, and that's not perceived as a weakness. I remember that day like yesterday. I had to ask, come again, did you say seek counseling? Did you say we're social workers and you're saying it's okay to go and ask for help and we're not going to be perceived as a problem? They go, no, it's actually a strength. So that was a huge eye-opening, for me, insight for me. So the more we say this, and even as therapists, psychologists, who we are, we go into supervision. We have to go and review and talk. We also get supervision. You know what I mean? So yeah.
No, I personally feel attacked by this topic, so I'm going to leave it there. But it is a moment of auditing yourself and seeing where you are. I think it's very important that we do it as well, because like you said, we want to lead by example, and we want to ensure that the next generation feels that it is okay to talk about these things. It is okay to be open. It is okay to seek help when you want it and need it. So those are very, very good ones. And I'm wondering what you have for us, Parker, as well. So how do you feel about that question?
I like this idea of just normalizing these conversations and making them accessible, accessibility. I think about one of my good friends, mentors, big brother to me. He always talks about checking in with his children about, they're quite young. How are you feeling in your Black body? Like almost every day, dinner time, check in. How are you feeling? What happened? Were there experiences of racism? Let's talk about them and normalize it. It might be emotional and that's okay, but normalize it. Don't keep it in, because it'll eat away. It'll cause illness. It'll cause pain. And so normalizing these conversations, I think school was also mentioned. I don't remember going to a school counselor ever. And one, because they didn't reflect me. And two, it was inaccessible. There's lineups, and maybe they wanted to focus on, curriculum and studies rather than mental health. Like there's all of these different barriers. So I think there's going to be a cultural shift, or at least across cultures, a bit of unlearning, to really, as you say, audit yourself, but examine how we've been surviving and seeing if it's maladaptive or not, and what is useful and what isn't. And I love what you said earlier about integration. How can we integrate the things that rejuvenate us, and the things that we practice to process our grief and all of these things? How can we integrate that and not just make it, 3 days and then it's back to business? Like, what about an ongoing conversation? And I know that might be controversial in some way, and whatever, that's fine. But just to normalize it and make it more accessible. And I do see that happening. I mean, we're here now. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think even the fact that, like, the normalizing these conversations and making it okay to talk about, earlier you mentioned about your experiences as a Black male growing up. A lot of the things that you are prone to do is be quiet, suppress your emotions, and a lot of these things where that also plays into a part where we don't normalize these conversations. So I'm really, really glad that you brought it up, because part of having that conversation is making it okay, making it a safe space, right? So
can I add to
absolutely.
Just briefly, I think there's a reason why our body reacts in certain ways to situations. There's a reason I cry. There's a reason why I weep. There's a reason why my nervous system starts to buzz if something is happening. I'm having these physiological reasons, and to not address them as a disservice to our experience as human beings. I think we have to just recognize all the levels that make us up and all our reactions, and just talk about them. It's not this daunting, scary thing. And in the terms of Black masculinity, it's really interesting having these conversations when you're speaking to people who are they have so much armor on, is what I say. Like we put armor on as soon as we go out the door. We don't even know what's happened.
Right.
But our shoulders are up to here for a reason. It's because we are stressed. We're holding all of these things in, and in that space of masculinity, having these conversations around mental health, and not like buzzword wellness, but actual wellness. It's going to take some time, but it's going to be it's happening.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I will now go into the social media, which you brought up a really good point where there's a lot of buzzwords. There's a lot of, whether being on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and solidarity with Black people and mental health and a bit of misinformation and so many things out there. So one of the things that we were curious about when we were talking about this panel is that, how has social media impacted, allyship towards Black people, especially around May and June? How was that for Black folks, obviously within your experience as well, but more so, people that were coming up as supporters, sending money, being like, I hear you, I'm listening, I see you, all of these things I can say personally, it affected me differently because I wasn't in this space to accept all of these words or actions. But for young people, how should they process it? Or rather than saying should, what can you advise them, or what can you say about these emotions that a lot of young Black people that were on social media viewing videos, viewing these messages, unsolicited advice and how to be an ally and all of these things? How do you think that they should process it, or give them a little bit of an advice? Parker, you can go ahead. And
do you mind if I start us off, Ayesha? Is it okay? Because this is actually just a recent, this is an ongoing conversation, actually, especially because I'm working with young kids constantly, talking about social media and how it kind of creates dissociation or disconnect or something. Like it's the least relational space. It doesn't matter how many likes you get or how many videos, it's the least relational space to have intentional conversation. I do think that social media activism or digital activism can be extremely problematic, although in many ways when it's used authentically, it's informative and important. But I think in the context of COVID-19, this question is really, really critical, because in this way, we're viewing each other as statistics, and we're not being very relational. We're losing the ability to call somebody and talk about what we're seeing on our screens. I mean, every time that there's a death right now, it's a part of a statistic. And my business partner, Dr. Taiwo Afolabi, said the other day that it's really sad that we are seeing these statistics every single day of lives, legacies, stories, family members, brothers, sisters, teachers dying, and we don't get anything else. There's no context for that. And I think that does do something for us. And another friend of mine says that we're a part of the microwave generation. We have like 5 minutes of attention, and then we swipe and we're on to the next. And so in the context of COVID-19, in the context of mental health, it's a really dangerous space to be in. So I think, I don't know if I have any other comments other than maybe we should have a conversation about having wider discussion for the kids in school about social media. Like actually talking about the responsibilities of being online and what to expect, what could happen, how to move. I know for Black youth who, you're clicking on stories on Instagram, and one picture is a literal video of George Floyd, and the next one is a dog, and then the next one is political strife happening in whatever. Like, it's just trauma vicariously. And so I think this is a really important conversation, especially in the context of this pandemic, because we're getting affected. It's seeping into us. Yeah.
And I just want to pull a little bit more from what you said, if Aisha doesn't mind. One of the things that you mentioned about specifically, the way young people use social media, or actually the interface of social media. There's no, pre-warning, or you get curious to know what that trigger warning is and all of these things. And it is a bit different in a way, in the way that it affects Black people, because in so many ways, Black people do influence social media in so many ways, and part of that, we find our voice in social media in so many ways. We rally in social media, we do mutual aid in social media. There's so many ways that it benefits us, but there's no handbook where it says this is how you use it and this is how you should be careful. So do you think that there should be a separate way of navigating race and social media when talking about this topic, especially for young people?
I think, when we talk about allyship as well, and like online digital allyship, whatever you want to talk about, the phrase that comes to mind is cultural appropriation. And like, we do move the needle online. Like Black culture, the way that it influences the TikToks and the Instas, and even the way that we mobilize, and you see it replicated in our music. I think it leads into a conversation around cultural appropriation, and what people need to think about is how they're engaging with the material that they're seeing online, if that makes sense. For a non-Black person, engaging with the material online, or if they feel moved, think about how you are then sending out your messages. Are you re-traumatizing folks? You may not even know. A trigger warning is nice, but like, what are you doing it for?
Right.
I also think, and this will be my last point on this, is social media in general, so many of us have it for just validation purposes. There's business or whatever, but there's a reason there's a like button, and that does something to us as well. And so I think it gets quite dangerous and performative when folks use social media in a way that is transactional, especially non-Black or non-Indigenous, non-Asian, non-POC folks using it in a way that is transactional, because then you're being performative. I'll leave it there. I know Ayesha has some thoughts.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ayesha. If you have something, insightful to let us know about this question as well.
I would just want to add that it is impacting our young ones. It does have an impact on mental health. And like we know, we're all holding it. We have, and you can tell it's another sort of addiction where you can't find your phone. Where's my phone? We're almost panicking. So that goes to show. So if we're talking about mental health, I'm going for an intervention. Doesn't matter what the information is out there, but the fact that we're going there, we're hitting our brain, that you're getting the instant gratification, you're looking so many times, is affecting our mental health. So if we want to look after ourselves, I will start with an intervention, turn the phone off. If you're going to bed, you say 10 p.m. Okay, 9 o'clock, I'm gonna, it's so hard, you want to pick it up and check. How many hits have I got? How many? It's impacting our mental health. So that's the only piece I want to add. And I also want to address the feeling of loss, that the information is there. We're getting bombarded, what's the word? Bombardment of information overload. That also is affecting our mental health. So I'm not going to what information is out there, because the information is out there. But social media in itself, everything is good as long as we can maintain a balance. How do you strive for balance? And when this is the place you hear somebody is gone and you watch George Floyd 10 times, every time you watch it again, so almost re-traumatizing you. So I want to, for young people out there, even parents, anybody, professionals out there, let's encourage people to be mindful of what you're watching. Give your mind a break from watching that. Instead of that, make a call, have a laugh with your friend. If you're watching something, read a book or go for a walk. What are practical things that you can do? Practice mindfulness, practice some breathing exercise. Have a conversation, talk to your family, talk. And these are the things that I'm just going for the intervention for now, because technology is not my thing. And yes, I have 2 teenagers, boys, who again, if I try to take it away, it's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it fires off some neurons that it makes us happy, even though it makes us sad, and we probably need to get away from it. But for some reason, I mean, we are at a generation where we're still discovering internet and how that affects us. There's so many void, understandings of how it actually affects us, and especially when talking about Black, Black youth, Black children. So I don't expect that we all have the answers for this. Um, I am mindful of time. Would it be okay if I throw 3 questions from the public, or another 5 to 10 minutes? It's good. All right. So I'm going to be picking 3 questions, and you can pick one of the questions from the public. I believe you have them as well. That is, that you would like to expand on. But I'm going to throw 3 questions, and you can choose the last one as your fourth if you choose to do so. So one of the things that came up a lot was how can schools, work, all these different places integrate the wellness of Black people and understand how racism affects Black folks. So like they've mentioned in schools, how does racism how does racism from their peers affect the mental health of Black students? So this is specifically talking about Black students, but you can put it in other environments as well. So how does it affect us, and what can these places do to make it a safer environment for Black folks in general?
So I'd like to start with, I'm mindful of the time, so I'm just going to go straight to the point.
Yeah, please. Yeah, go ahead.
With the teachers, everybody should know now, racism does have impact on emotional well-being. It causes psychological distress, depression, low self-esteem, and it's just not just the teacher unconsciously doing it, but their colleagues as well. And so that means that when a teacher, whoever's listening to this, a question, a report, a complaint is come to you, be open to your investigation. Just because the person is the last person who's quiet doesn't mean they're the guilty one. Be open, be curious, and find out. And everyone remember, there is the racism, there's intergeneration, there is the trauma. And so the Black children, Black people, Black workers, Black teachers, Black everybody is coming with fourfold trauma. So whenever you're in interaction or seeing with them, what you are seeing is the trauma they've experienced. And trauma, as you know already, comes in various forms. Either we're fighting, or flight, or freeze. And the fight is the person standing their ground. It's not that they're being disrespectful, because the brain has kicked in, the experiencing trauma. So they want to stand their ground. Some people flight, they want to walk away, they live in the city. It's not that they're scared, but the brain has survival mode. That's what they're reacting to. So teachers, wherever we are, ensure that you are aware, be aware that the person maybe is actually reacting to trauma. Then be curious in your investigation, in your follow-up, in the interaction with the family, in your report writing, because the report that you've written for grade 1 is following the child all along. And that's my pet peeve. Be mindful of what report you write.
Thank you. That was very well said. How about you, Parker?
Ayesha summed it up pretty well.
Yeah.
She spoke to, I just think about my own experience in school and what I wanted in terms of support. And right. I guess all I can say is it's okay not to know everything as a teacher, as a practitioner, but specifically we're talking about school. So as a teacher, you don't know everything. And so it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to continue the education, and ask the questions of what can I do differently, or what can I do to support you? We don't want to isolate students in doing that, but just taking the time, because it's a different experience. So I guess I'll just leave it there.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to throw in one more question. The third one, I know I said 4, but I want to be mindful of the fact that it's Friday. And I'm sure you guys are wanting to go and enjoy your Friday. So the last question from me is a little bit outside of, summarizing what the public questions were. What are a few things that you can think of that you would like to see improved within the mental health in general, whether it being professionals, whether it being, what community centers, whatever it is that deals with the wellness of people, what do you think that they should be integrating to make it safer and better for Black people? We have touched on it previously, but I want you to envision it and how that looks like for you and hopefully future generation and whatnot. Almost like in an ideal world, how would it look like for you?
I'm going to begin with, I want to see more funding for these spaces. We need more funding because that will lead to representation. I want to see curriculum changes. I want to see shifts in the curriculum that reflect the broad experiences of Blackness, representation in what we're learning, not just one chapter on slavery in Social Studies 9, but like, let's talk about the joy, let's talk about the grief. But I think it starts with funding in this Western context, super capitalist, you know, we're kind of put in a position where when we apply for grants as a community, we're still trying to compete with each other, crabs in a bucket. And so what does it mean when there's actually a spread of wealth amongst different communities to create these spaces, to tell the stories, to improve the mental health, to show Black youth what does it mean to be a Black counselor? What does it mean to like, how can we create more examples or visual examples for these youth to see? Yeah.
Right. No, we're going to have Trudeau on the line after this. We're going to inquire about that grant. Don't worry. But it's a really, really great point, because in a Western world, you know, full of, you know, capitalist society, we do need the funding in order to progress, unfortunately and fortunately at the same time. But I'm really, really glad you brought it up. How about you for Ayesha?
I want to start with humanity. I want to start with humanity. Remember, if I cut this, the same blood that's coming out is for everybody. Basically, humanity, and Parker's mentioned the funding aspect, but humanity, be mindful, be open to people, be curious. Any organization, start with, there is a problem. There is a problem. There is a problem. I say three times for emphasis. Acknowledge the problem, and this is a model that we use. Identify the problem, agree that there's a problem, find a root cause analysis, work with empathy, be empathetic as people. And for the few Black people who are striving in providing their services, support them. Once you've supported the Black counselors who are providing this, then they can start also making the referrals to others. Oh, go to this organization, they're well informed. And then it will start channeling through, because they trust, the Black people trust Black people, I hope, you know. So that's the key thing I want to say. For all else space, I want to address the Black community. Please, I humbly ask of you, please take care of yourself. Go for the walk. 3 things, research-based: nutrition, make sure you're eating well, sleep, take care of your sleep, and exercise, drinking fluids, few things, mindful breathing, because if we're not breathing, they've got us. We want to keep going.
Those are amazing points to leave it off. I almost want to leave it there. You know, it goes back to everything when we talk about Blackness. It is not something that we're just experiencing with it being a hot topic now, but these we're unworking generations and generations of hurt, trauma, like you've mentioned, you know, wars, colonialism, slavery. These are all of these things that are made up in our DNA and our history. So a lot of that is hard to undo. But the main thing that you left us off with is to take care of ourselves and to value our bodies and value, you know, our breath and, you know, appreciating that and making sure that we're taking care of that, taking care of ourselves, because we can really get wrapped up in the racism and all the things wrong. But is there anything else that you guys would like to leave us with, or a question that stuck out for you that you'd like to expand on? I'm more than happy to keep you guys here with me, but unfortunately I can't. But I'd love to hear your last words for our audience.
Just gratitude. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for your moderation, and I'm glad that this topic, or these topics, have even brought up and are being shared. So I think it's important. And I want to thank Ayesha for the amazing points as well. So thanks for your time, everyone.
Thank you.
I also want to say thank you to Black Connections for inviting us to this forum, to give the opportunity to talk about Black mental health. And because that's where, when the dialogue begins, that's when the action takes place. So thank you. And thank you for the great work you guys are doing behind the scenes. But Parker, it's a joy to get to meet you today. I'm sure I'll find you, I'll look for you, I'll find you somehow. So, and the final note, I want to say, yes, great job. And to society, to the people, I say thank you, and let's continue to take care of ourselves. And we've just begun. Remember, this is only an hour. What's been happening for thousands of years? So, but like I say, it takes with everything, takes with one step. So for those listening, please, I humbly ask of you again, educate your heart, because the heart is a seat of motivation for change.
Thank you so much. Thank you both so much. Thank you, Ayesha. Thank you, Parker. I really, really appreciate, all the knowledge, all the experiences, the storytelling. I really, really, really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. February just ended, but I like to think that Black history is a year-long experience. So I want to also acknowledge that and also say thank you on behalf of this event and Black Connections. I know Milka and Jerusalem did a lot of work to bring this together and to have these settings. So I also want to thank them. They're not here right now, but thank you so much. And again, thank you both so much for teaching us and being with us on this Friday night. So I appreciate it. But yeah, that would be it.